In the silence of deep space, a tiny dragon clutched his bottle with claws that trembled like thunder, waiting to strike. When raiders came to claim him as cargo, alarms echoed, doors sealed, and one brave scientist stood between greed and innocence. But just as all hope seemed lost, an unexpected ally arrived, and what happened next would change the fate of the stars forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The night cycle on Aurora Station 12 was gentle, a dim hue that made the metal corridors breathe like a sleeping whale. In the medical wing, monitors hummed softly, while the smallest heartbeat on the station tapped out its steady rhythm. Dr. Lena Morrow paused at the threshold because the sight still tugged on her. Onyx, wrapped in layered thermal cloth, 6 little claws wrapped around a custom feeding bottle, as if the bottle itself were gravity. His eyes tracked her. They were deep blue, the kind of blue that catches a person off guard, like fresh water under starlight. He was only 3 weeks by the estimate, though his gaze held more years than that. Ember, his sister, dozed under a warming panel. She had already accepted the tiny protein morsels they prepared for starborn hatchlings. Onyx, not at all. Onyx treated the bottle like a promise, and the world like a question. Lena checked the nutrient logs. "Still team bottle, I see," she said in a soft voice. Onyx replied with a sound that was not quite a purr and not quite a growl. It was a little drum roll of a sound, prepared to charm, prepared to negotiate. Dr. Rajiv Kumar joined her, straightening his coat that never seemed to wrinkle. His instruments were ready. His smile was the calm of a person who had made peace with late-night surprises. "Cognition scans still place him around human kindergarten levels," Rajiv murmured. "He knows how much he's asking for when he points at that dispenser." "I know," Lena said. "I keep telling myself not to give in. Then he does the eyes." She meant the eyes that slowed time. She meant the eyes that made a person remember the wreckage they had found, how the derelict hauler had been punctured and abandoned, how the animals had been crammed into half-sized containment pods. Most had not survived. Only Onyx and Ember had been young enough to bounce back with careful, constant care. The rest had been relocated to a sanctuary where space was wide and the walls did not echo. "Hungry?" Lena asked. Onyx adjusted his grip, the bottle tilted at a familiar angle, the level dropping sip by measured sip. He drank like a child who understood counting. "We need to try solids again," Rajiv said. "Tiny portion after his feed, just a little." "He will stage a revolt," Lena said. "Then we negotiate." They set the bowl near him, a gentle mixture designed for Draconis astrum juveniles, laced with trace minerals to echo what stardust-fed parents might bring back to the nest. Ember stirred, sniffed, and pushed her small nose into the mixture without a second thought. Her veil-thin wings trembled with quiet gratitude. Onyx examined the bowl, then the bottle, then Lena. The look said plainly, "I have made my choice." Before anyone could try a second tactic, the corridor vibrated. A sharp alarm cut through the soft night tones. Text scrolled along the wall display. "Unauthorized approach, Sector 7." The medical wing sat uncomfortably near Sector 7. The station's voice, calm and automatic, requested all non-essential personnel to move to secure nodes. "That's close," Rajiv said, glancing at Ember's enclosure. Captain Orion Vega's voice came over the intercom, steady as a metronome. "Medical, stand by. Do not move the specimens until advised." The choice of nouns made Lena's jaw tighten. Not specimens, lives. But protocol is often colder than truth. Onyx felt it too. His fingers tightened on the bottle, and the little sound started again. But this time the tone carried a thread of warning. Ember slid under the lip of her thermal cover, only her nose peeking out. Lena reached for the travel cradle, the one with secure straps and heated lining. In a practice motion, she guided Ember inside, while Rajiv prepared a second cradle for Onyx. The hatchling would not let the bottle go. Lena decided not to fight that battle in a hallway where alarms echoed. They stepped into the corridor. The station lights had shifted from night to alert, dawn orange at the edges, red at the doorframes. "Straight to the core sanctuary," Rajiv said, already calculating the fastest route through the spine walkway. "We avoid Sector 7. Before they could take 3 steps, the intercom clicked again. A new voice spoke, layered with a slick, beige confidence. "Medical Wing, this is Representative Callum Reed of Sirenex Consortium with Assistant Soraya Cade. We are docking with Captain Vega's authorization to collect our property. Please prepare the young pair for transfer." Property. Lena felt a calm anger settle over her, the kind that does not burn but cools and hardens to a plan. Onyx pressed his head against her sleeve, bottle clutched like a small star he refused to drop. "We're not handing anyone over," Rajiv whispered. "No," Lena said. "We buy time. You take Ember to the service ladder and head toward Escape Bay 3. I'll keep them talking." "You sure?" "Go," she said, gentler than the word sounded. "Ember needs an uninterrupted path." Rajiv slipped down the side corridor, moving quiet as a thought. Lena stepped toward the intersection where the medical wing opened into the long spinal hall. Captain Vega appeared there, uniform fastened, expression difficult to read. The Sirenex envoys followed at a respectful distance, shining like polished machinery. "Dr. Morrow," Vega said, "we have a jurisdiction question. I need you to remain cooperative while we review documents." "I'll remain protective," Lena said, "and clear." She held Onyx a little closer. In that small motion lived an oath. If the world came for this child with forms and figures, then the world would find her standing in the doorway. The first 5 minutes of the crisis had arrived with all the quiet force of a tide, and it was not done rising. The envoys stopped at the threshold, their boots whispering against the clean floor. Callum Reed's smile did not reach his eyes. Soraya Cade carried a slate with scrolling codes that claimed rights and waivers and salvage law from systems far from here. Behind them, 2 station security officers stood in a ready posture, glancing to Vega for cues. "Let's confirm," Reed said, voice pleasant, almost musical. 2 juveniles of the astral dragon variety were recovered from a vessel with no registered owner. By maritime salvage tradition applicable to interstellar drift, unclaimed life forms aboard may be transferred to the rescuer or their assignee. "They have names," Lena said evenly. "Onyx and Ember." "Names can be logged after transfer," Reed replied. "We've arranged transport. A specialist will care for them." "A specialist with what credentials?" Lena asked. "Private," Soraya said, eyes on her slate. Captain Vega's expression remained neutral. He had the look of a person balancing a blade on the edge of his palm. "We verify everything," he said. "We'll need feeding protocols, medical readouts, and the exact formula composition." Lena nodded like she was already aligning the files. 30 minutes, she said, without looking away from Vega. "I'll gather it all." 15, Reed said. "We are on a schedule." Onyx shifted, and his bottle bumped Lena's collarbone. If anyone asked later when the idea began, she would say it started right there, with a soft bump, a heartbeat, and the sight of a child who was brave enough to be stubborn. "All right," Lena said. "But he needs quiet. He spooks easily." She lifted her chin toward the medical bay door. Vega inclined his head, and the small procession moved. Inside, the room smelled like distilled water and clean metal. Monitors fluttered with gentle graphs. Lena placed Onyx on the padded table and set the bottle down where he could still touch it. She crossed to a cabinet and opened the emergency kit. not the sedatives. A different switch lived there. Rajiv's contribution after one too many drills. A discreet trigger that initiated a bio-hold quarantine. Onyx watched her. He understood enough to know that something important was happening. He slid off the table, tottered toward the supply shelf, and almost casually thumped the side of the door panel with his tail. The panel blinked. The door whisked shut. Soraya looked up, irritated. Reed's polite mask slipped a fraction. "Sorry," Lena said mildly. "He does that when he's anxious." Reed tapped his wrist comm. "Open the door." The panel flashed, then blinked again, this time with the station's cool voice. "Bioseal engaged. All sections hold. Decontamination pending." "What did you do?" Soraya demanded. "Nothing," Lena said, palms open. "He's been spirited." Reed turned to Captain Vega. "Override it." Vega approached the wall console, tried a code, then another. He frowned, as if the puzzle surprised him. "This route is cut off," he said. "We'll need to wait for a reset." The envoys did not like that answer. Their smiles fell away like paper. "Fine," Reed said, collecting himself. "We'll wait." "While we wait, Doctor, explain why the male refuses solids." Lena kept her voice steady. "He's not ready." 3 weeks is past weaning for this species, Soraya said. "Not in real conditions," Lena countered. "Not after trauma. Not without a parent." Reed's eyes pinned her. "And yet you keep making bottles." "Because he's a person," Lena said, "and because trust builds slow." The room settled into a tense quiet. Beyond the sealed door, boots thudded, orders passed. The station's ventilation whispered like grass in wind. Onyx touched his bottle with one claw, and then, in a move so small and so clear, pushed the bottle toward Lena. She met his eyes. He looked back with a question. "Do we wait together?" Time stretched. Reed paced. Soraya checked feeds that would not open. Captain Vega stood very still, his gaze on the processing light of the sealed panel, as if it were telling him a story only he could hear. A faint ping tapped the inside of Lena's wrist. Rajiv short code. Ember secure. Bay 3. Weena breathed once, quiet. Onyx's ears twitched. He must have heard the barely audible vibration. He made a tiny chirp, the kind that felt like 2 notes of a lullaby. Reed's patience thinned. "Captain, I must insist." The intercom clicked. A new voice arrived, crisp and official, but not Sirenex. "This is Alliance Science Escort Theta. Aurora Station 12, your beacon was received. We are on final approach for inspection and support." Reed's mouth opened, then closed. "Beacon?" he said, as if the word were an insult that had snuck into the room. Captain Vega finally turned, and in his eyes lived something that had not been present before, a quiet permission to breathe. "I requested external review," he said. "When the cargo manifest on that derelict arrived blank and your papers read too perfect, I preferred a second set of eyes." Soraya glared. "You said you needed cooperation." "I do," Vega said. "From the law." The bioseal held. The station hummed. And for the first time since the corridor alarm, Lena's shoulders eased an inch. Onyx, sensing the weather had shifted, made a cluck of satisfaction and tucked his nose against her sleeve. They were not safe yet, but the tide had turned. The docking bay lights glowed like a slow sunrise when the Alliance shuttle slipped into its cradle. The bioseal timer finally winked to green. Doors hissed, and a thin fog of sterilized air drifted away. Lena carried Onyx in the crook of her arm. Captain Vega walked beside them, gaze level. Reed and Soraya trailed stiffly, confidence slightly scuffed. The bay doors opened, and the visitors stepped through. Not soldiers first, scientists. A small team in clean field suits, eyes bright with curiosity. At their center stood a woman with gentle shoulders and a steady step. "Professor Mina Leong," she said, voice warm. "We study the starborn. Captain Vega, thank you for the signal." Behind her, the world changed shape. A tall figure moved with a grace that rearranged the air. The adult dragon's scales were a twilight spectrum, violet that deepened to blue where shadow folded, and a suggestion of silver along the edges. She held herself, tail easy, wings resting like folded silk, head lowered in greeting. Her eyes matched Onyx's eyes, but older. They carried the maps of places he had not yet flown. "This is Solara," Professor Leong said. "She has raised several broods in sanctuary care. We obtained temporary permission for a teaching visit." Onyx went still. Not frightened, still, the way a person gets still when every sense turns up all at once. Lena felt it happen. His small body went alert from claws to ears. He made a hesitant sound. Solara replied with a low, kind rumble that seemed to touch the rails of the room. "May we try a ritual?" Professor Leong asked. "If he agrees." Lena nodded and set Onyx carefully down. He kept one claw on her boot. Solara noticed and honored the distance. She did not advance. She shifted her head so her eyes aligned with his, and then she sang. The sound was more breath than note, a gentle cadence that turned the room into a warm bowl. The song held two ideas. You are safe, and you are seen. Onyx's ears folded back in a way that meant listening. Solara's tongue touched the air, a tasting gesture. Then she turned to a stasis container and drew out a pale, faintly glowing stone. Professor Leong smiled. "Luminite," she said. "Soft strata with the mineral balance their bodies crave at weaning. It dissolves more easily than protein paste. We learn this from wild observations. Parents offer a softened shard as a first step." Solara bit a small edge from the stone, chewed with slow care, then lowered her head and extended the softened piece upon her tongue. Her eyes never left Onyx's. The message was simple. "I share this with you." Onyx looked to Lena and then back to Solara. He crept forward, claws clicking softly against the bay floor. He sniffed. He hesitated. He took the tiniest nibble and paused as the new texture met his teeth. His eyes opened a fraction wider. He chewed. The first swallow was tentative. The second came quicker. He reached again. Lena laughed, the kind of laugh that leans on air. "He did it," she whispered, half to herself, half to the stars. Rajiv arrived at a run, breathless from the service ladders, ember nestled in the crook of his arm like a coal that glows steady. He slowed when he saw the scene and smiled, the relief bright and unforced. "Hello there," he said to Solara, as if greeting a teacher in a quiet room. Reed attempted a recovery. "Fascinating," he said, as though he too had planned such a demonstration all along. "We will, of course, take Solara's method under advisement once transfer is complete." Professor Leong did not look at him. "Transfer is not complete," she said. "In fact, your documentation raises many questions. Our legal colleagues will resolve those while we work on care." Captain Vega folded his hands behind his back, posture loose for the first time. "You heard the professor," he said to station security. "Escort our guests to the conference suite." Reed began to protest. Soraya bristled. But the room had shifted its attention. Solara, kindly unhurried, offered a new softened shard to Ember, who accepted without reservation. Onyx, encouraged by his sister, stole a tiny extra bite and then looked up at Lena, cheeks bulged with the new food, and made an expression that clearly said, "Okay, I admit, this is good." Days turned into a pattern that felt like a lifted weight. Solara taught in circles and pauses. She showed Onyx how to unfold his wings in a room where nothing sharp waited to hurt him. She guided his tail to act like a rudder. She hummed through sounds that meant yes and sounds that meant later, and a whole family of sounds that meant close, but not quite. Ember experimented with gliding from one platform to another, her landing thumps tidy and brave. Lena watched the lessons with a scientist's notebook and a guardian's heart. Rajiv adjusted diets, added trace elements, and walked with a bounce that made interns smile. Captain Vega visited in the evenings, quiet in his chair, a person who did not need to be thanked and yet was. News trickled in. The documents the envoys had presented were elegant, but not honest. The Alliance logged their violations, and proceedings began that would end with laws upheld. None of that solved the ache of the past, but it kept the future from being borrowed by people who did not deserve it. Near the end of the third week of Solara's stay, a small moment wrote itself into memory. Onyx stood on a platform. Wings slightly out, tail balanced. He looked at Solara, who stood below, and made the tiny question note. Solara answered with the soft, yes. Onyx stepped into the glide. It was short, lopsided at first, and then he corrected midair and landed in a way that surprised even him. He looked at Lena, bright as a spark, and in that look she saw a thread cross an invisible line. From fear to trying, from trying to joy. He still kept the bottle. Not as a requirement, but as comfort, like a familiar blanket saved for evenings. That was fine. Trust builds slow. Change moves in gentle arcs. The day Solara left, she folded her head to both juveniles and sang a longer song. The last note hung in the doorway, even after she was gone, as if the room remembered. The quiet returned in a kinder shape. Days lined up like polished stones. Lena held lectures for Academy streams who wanted to learn about ethical care. Rajiv wrote a field guide in plain language so new techs would not get lost in jargon. Captain Vega learned to bring snacks that did not crumble near sensitive equipment. The story of the Starborn young traveled across networks, but on the station it was just morning and evening, feeding and cleaning, play and rest. The tribunal finished its work. The people who had tried to buy futures they did not earn were sentenced under codes neither flexible nor cruel, just steady. The derelict was cleaned, the broken pods counted and marked, and a small memorial ringed a photo where no faces showed, only the curve of a wing and the bravery of survival. It mattered. Not the headlines, the remembering. Onyx grew at his own pace. Ember discovered a love of airlocks, only the sealed, safe ones, and liked to press her nose to the little window where the mineral rings made bright threads through dark. Onyx practiced glides and small hops, always with a careful consideration first, as if checking the shape of the moment. The bottle found its place on a shelf near his bed, then on a hook by the warming unit, then in Lena's satchel for travel days when he wanted to know it was close. Comfort does not need a reason to be allowed. When the message arrived from Ganymede Haven, it came with a touch of ceremony and a long list of kindness. The sanctuary had space and mentors, training domes, and open arcs of safe sky. The director proposed a date. Lena read it twice, felt the gentle pinch in her chest, and wrote back, yes. The morning of departure, the station gathered in a small semicircle at the bay. There were no speeches. There were smiles, and a few damp eyes, and one maintenance tech who had never learned how to whisper, saying, "They're going to love the big dome," which made everyone chuckle and swallow. Ember trotted up the ramp first, curious and eager. Her wings shivered with the promise of distance. Onyx followed to the edge and stopped. He looked back at Lena. A long look. Not a plea. Not a taking stock look. The last page of a chapter. "You're ready," Lena said, very quietly. "And I'm okay." He took a step back toward her and did something he had never done before. He rose onto his hind legs, spreading his wings just enough to make a small tent, and wrapped them around her shoulders. The heat of him, the steady rhythm of his breath, the little hum he made, she could have built a house in that sound. Then he reached into her satchel with careful claws and drew out the oldest object in his world, the first bottle he had ever held on Aurora Station 12. The one with a tiny scratch near the rim where a hurried knight had bumped metal. He pressed it into her hands. "For me?" Lena asked, "because words help ritual take form." Onyx nodded, a firm and certain nod he had learned from humans. Then he turned, took a breath, and walked up the ramp. Halfway, he paused to touch noses with Ember, then both disappeared into the soft light of the shuttle. Rajiv leaned close. "He chose," he said. "Simple as that." Lena stood with the bottle resting in her palms. Captain Vega joined her, hands in his pockets. "Hard part of the job," he said. "And the best part," Lena answered. The shuttle left without drama, a clean lift and a brief flare. The bay felt larger afterward, as if it had exhaled. Weeks passed. Lena placed the bottle on a little shelf near a window where the rings painted silver lines across black. She sometimes stood there between tasks, not sad exactly, just listening to a quiet that now included distance. One afternoon, a transmission pinged. The file label held 3 words: Haven Flight Room. Lena tapped it open, and the screen filled with a view so open she could feel the air. A young dragon swept across the dome with a casual arc. His scales had deepened toward night, with a hidden blue that winked when he turned. He landed neatly beside a red juvenile, who bumped him with the affection of old adventure. Ember, taller now, tossed her head, proud. Then a smaller shape entered frame, wobbling, unsure. A new rescue, soft-eyed and trembling with the try of it all. The young one looked at Onyx, and a silence passed between them that needed no translation. Onyx lowered his head and made the gentle 2-note sound Solara had once offered in this very bay. He walked to a tray of pale, glowing stones, chose a sliver of luminite, softened it with careful bites, and offered it on his tongue with the patience of a teacher who remembers. The little one tasted. Surprise arrived. A second bite followed. Off camera, someone laughed with relief. On camera, Onyx did not rush. He waited, he breathed, he shared the small joy of the first swallow. The message ended with a short line from the sanctuary director. "Your boy helps the frightened ones take their first steps. We call him the calm teacher of first bites." Lena covered her mouth and laughed, the kind that leaks a tear or two because happiness needs an overflow valve. She set the message on loop. When it played again, she noticed a tiny detail she had missed. Before offering the luminous shard, Onyx glanced toward the upper viewing window, the way a person glances toward home. That evening, she placed the old bottle on a stand, not hidden, not overly displayed. Just there, like a friend's chair, kept open. The mineral rings beyond the window shivered in the station night, and somewhere between Aurora Station 12 and Ganymede Haven, a line of care ran quiet and unbroken. The end was not a door closing, it was a horizon widening, as if the station itself had learned from a small dragon how to let go of a bottle and reach for the wider sky. And whenever new stories whispered through the corridors, Lena would smile, because she now understood a soft truth. Love that is held with open hands finds a way to teach itself forward.